Hello all and welcome back. So how was your weekend? Did you see any videos? Did you practice something? I would love to know that. So go ahead and leave a comment under this video. My last week was pretty hectic and I know for sure that this week is also going to be very hectic. My mom is getting operated on the 19th of this month, which is in a couple of days. And I will have to stay in the hospital. So who knows, maybe the next video that I'll record will be from the hospital. Let's see how it goes. Okay, in this video, we will cover the worksheet object. We will understand the difference between worksheets and the sheets object. We will also learn how to write and read from an Excel cell in a specific worksheet. We will also try and find the last row and the last column in a particular worksheet so we can write or read from that range accordingly. We will also understand what is the difference between .value, .value2, .text properties of a range and so much more. So let's begin. The worksheet object is a member of the worksheets collection. The worksheets collection contains all the worksheet objects in a workbook. Right now, there is only one worksheet as we can see on the bottom left corner. When you click on the plus sign right next to sheet 1, a new worksheet is added. Both the sheet 1 and sheet 2 are worksheets. So now this workbook has two worksheets. If you right click on the sheet tab and then if you click on insert, you will get the insert dialog box from where you can not only insert a worksheet but you can also insert a chart sheet, MS Excel 4 macro, international macro sheet and MS Excel 5 dialog. So what I'm going to do is for demonstration purpose, I'm going to insert all four of them. We already have the worksheet, so I'll not insert that. So I'll click on chart. Okay. I then right click again and click on insert. Then I'll insert MS Excel 4 macro. Right click again, insert international macro sheet. Right click again, insert and MS Excel 5 dialog. So all the 6 objects, sheet 1, dialog 1, macro 2, macro 1, chart 1, sheet 2 are a member of the sheets collection. The Excel 4 macro sheet and the international macro sheet were replaced by VBA in 1995. So they are basically defunct. Feel free to ignore them. Honestly, I have not seen a single person using it for a very long time. The MS Excel 5 dialog sheet has been replaced by user forms. We'll not get into user forms in this video. We will learn about user forms in detail in the next video. So you can ignore this as well. So we are now just left with worksheet and the chart sheets. So the sheets collection contains all the sheets in the workbook, whether it's the worksheet, chart sheet, Excel 4 macro sheet or MS Excel 5 dialog sheet. This piece of information is very important when you're writing your code. If you declare a worksheet object and then try to store a chart sheet in it, then you will get an error. Let's launch the Visual Basic Editor and then we will understand and interact with the worksheet object in detail. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. We will now press the shortcut key Alt F11 to launch the Visual Basic Editor. Let's insert a new module. Right click on the VBA project and then under Insert, click on Module. We will now insert a procedure called Sub Worksheets versus Sheets Example. To begin with, let's get the count of the worksheets in the workbook and then we will display it using a message box. MSJ box this workbook.worksheets.count. To run this procedure, click on the Run Sub User Form button or you can also press F5. So when I click on this, I get 2. So this means this workbook has only 2 worksheets. Now let's change the worksheets to sheets. So I'm going to delete work. So only sheets is remaining now. Now when I run this, see what do I get? 6. So it included all the 6 sheets. The worksheets, the dialog sheets, the macro sheets and the chart sheet. So the worksheet object is not only a member of the worksheets collection, but it is also a member of the sheets collection. Since in this video, we will learn how to work with the worksheet object to read and write to it. Let me delete the unnecessary sheets. So I will go back here and I will delete all of these. We don't need these. Let's go back to the code. Let's first write data to a worksheet, but before that, let's declare a worksheet object and then we will bind it with the range to write to that range. There are a lot of online tutorials and YouTube videos which demonstrate how to write to a range or a sheet using Activesheet, Activeworkbook and selection. Please do not do that. That's a very bad practice. Later in this video, I will show you why it is a bad practice. You should always declare your objects and you should work with those objects. Let's say we want to write to sheet 1 and we want to insert the data in a tabular format. So let's first declare our worksheet object. So I'm going to delete this, dim ws as worksheet. And now I'll set the worksheet object. Set ws is equal to this workbook dot sheets sheet 1. You can also use the sheet code name as I mentioned in the video Understanding Excel Object Model in Office 365. So you can also write the code as set ws is equal to sheet 1. So like I was saying that I want to write to sheet 1. So I'll go to sheet 1. Let's say I want to create headers in cell A1 to E1. And the headers that I want to create are serial number, first name, last name, date of birth and gender. These are, let's say, details of an employee. So this is how I would do it. ws.range a1.value is equal to serial number. Now if I run this, see what happens. When I go back to the worksheet, the serial number is written in cell A1. Here I've used the range object, which is the representation of a cell or cells on your worksheet to directly use the cell address. Or you can use the cells object to achieve the same thing. So this line can also be written as ws.cells start parenthesis 1,1.value is equal to serial number. So both these lines will do the same thing. So let me quickly write the rest of the code to write the header values. And we are done. Let's run this. We'll go to the worksheet and see if the header values have been written from A1 to E1. And they have been. Let me auto-fit the columns. Okay, let's go back to the code. Now, since we are repeating the WS worksheet object, we can use the with and with statement. If you are not sure how with and with works, then I recommend watching the video Understanding Excel Object Model. So I'm going to change the code now. With WS and then before the period, I'm going to press the enter key and then the tab key. Similarly, I'll do it with this. And I'll type end with. Now we have the headers in place. Let's enter a couple of entries below the headers. In this video, I'm going to hard code the values. In the next video, we will use user forms to accept input from the user and then we will enter those dynamic values at runtime. So let's enter a record. Now when we run this and if we go back to the worksheet, we'll see that the data has been written to row 2. Now, what if you did not want to hard code the row? So if we go back to the code, if you notice, we are hard coding the row here, A2, B2, C2. Let's say we want the data to be written to the next available row. So the next available row is row 3. And if there is data in row 3, then 4 becomes the next available row. So how do we get the next available row using a code? So let's go back to the code. Since we already have headers now, we can delete this part of the code. We don't need this anymore because it is already there. Now I'm going to declare few variables and then I'll write the code to find the next available row. I'll quickly write the code and then I will explain what exactly is happening. And we are done. So what I've done is I've declared 4 variables. The first name, the last name, date of birth and gender. And in those variables, I'm setting some values. This is my last row variable. This will hold the last available row. This code finds the last row which has data in column A. So if I want to find the next available row, I will add 1 to it. Before I explain what exactly is happening here, let me demonstrate something to you. So let's go back to the worksheet. Now let's go to the last cell in column A, which is A10485676. Now, if you press the end key once and then press the up arrow key, see what happens. Excel moves you to the last cell which has data, which is second row in this case. So if we go back, this code exactly mimics that. Rows.count will give you 1048576. So if I copy this and if I paste it in immediate window, let me make the immediate window slightly bigger. And if I type the question mark and rows.count and I press enter, I get 1048576. And end xlUp is mimicking pressing the end and the up arrow key. Also, if you notice, we have a period before rows.count. We often choose to ignore that. I always advise using period before rows.count and columns.count. If you do not use a period before rows, then a classic scenario where the code will fail is when you are working between Excel 2003 and Excel 2007 plus workbooks. And that is because the rows.count returns 65536 for Excel 2003 and earlier, and 1048576 for Excel 2007 and later. Similarly, columns.count returns 256 for Excel 2003 and earlier, and 16,384 for Excel 2007 and later. The very fact that Excel 2007 Plus has 1048576 rows also emphasizes on the fact that we should always declare the variable which will hold the row value as long and not as integer. Because if you declare it as integer, you have a possibility of an overflow error. Using this approach has a certain drawback. This approach will skip any hidden rows, hidden either manually or via a filter. So it is better to unhide rows before using this. So if I go back to the worksheet, right now this is the last cell. So if I hide this, then I will not get 2 as the last row which has data. I'll get 1 as the last row which has data. Let's go back. Now let's run this code with a breakpoint so that we understand what is going on. If you're not sure what is a breakpoint and how to use it, then see the video error handling and debugging part 2. So let's insert a breakpoint on this line. And I'm now going to run the code. If you take your mouse cursor over rows.count, you will notice that it shows a value 1048576. If you do not see this value, then click on Tools and then click on Options. In the Editor tab, ensure the Auto Data Tips is checked. If it is checked, then you will be able to see these data tips. I've spoken about this in detail in my video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. Now, if you copy this line, I pressed Ctrl C, and then if you type a question mark in the immediate window and if you paste that line and if you press enter, you get 2. So like I was saying, if you go back and if you hide this, and if you go back and if you press enter again, you will get 1. You will not get 2. And hence you should always ensure that no rows are hidden when you are using this approach. So I'll go back and I'll unhide it. Let's go back to the code. This is exactly what we got when we pressed the end key and then we pressed the up arrow key in the worksheet. Let's press F8. Now, if you take your cursor over last row, you will notice that the last row is 3. So 3 is the next available row. And in this line, what I'm doing here is, I'm saying write to A ampersand last row, which is A ampersand 3, which is nothing but A3. So I'm saying write to cell A3. And here I'm saying last row minus 1. So last row is 2 minus 1 is 1. So what I'm doing is I'm automatically generating the serial numbers. Let's press F8. If I go back, you'll see A3 has now 2. If you check the next line, what I'm saying here is in cell B3, write the first name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish running the code. And if I go back to the worksheet, I'll notice all the data is there in the third row. Let's try one more example. So we'll go back to the code. And this time I'm going to remove the breakpoint and I will change the name from Jane to, let's say, David. last name Roger, and let's say 12/12/2000. Gender is male. So if you go back to the worksheet, the next available row is the 4th row. So the data should be written here when I run that code. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to run this code. And if I go back to the worksheet, I'll notice that the data has been written to the 4th row. Just like we can find the last row which has data, we can also find the last column which has data. So last column is column E, which has data. So let's try and find the last column. I'll go back to the code and I'm going to copy this code, and then I will insert a module and I'm going to paste the code here. So I'm going to change the name of the procedure to last column example. Let's say I want to add a header in column F. So I will have to find the next available column. So I'll go back to the code and I'll delete this. I will declare a variable called header, and let's say I want to store the address of the employee in that column. So I will type header is equal to address, and this last row becomes last call, this becomes last call, and this becomes dot cells 1 comma dot columns dot count dot end xlToLeft dot column +1. And here I will type dot cells 1 comma last call dot value is equal to header, and I'll delete the rest. So what this code will do is it will find the next available column and then it will insert the header in that. Just like we press the end and the up arrow key while finding the last cell which has data in column A, we can press end and the left arrow key to get the last column which has the data. So let's test this. Let's say I want to find the last column which has data in row 1. So in row 1, I'll press the end button and I'll press the right arrow key. And I'm right at the end, which is XFD. Now from here, if I press the end button and then I press left arrow key, see what happens. The code takes me to the last column which has data, which is column E. So this is what we are going to mimic in our code. So let's go back to the code. I'm going to insert a breakpoint here and then I will run the code. Columns.count gives me 16,384, and then I'm pressing xlToLeft, and this one is row number 1. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to find the last column which has data in row 1. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in immediate window, and let's see what do we get. And I get 5. 5 is for column E. E is the 5th column. So if I scroll back, you'll notice this is 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. This is the 5th column. Let's go back. And since we want the next available column, we are adding +1 to it. Let's press F8. Here what I'm saying is dot cells 1 comma 6, which is row 1 column 6. If I go back, this is row 1 column 6, which is this cell F1. Cells 1 comma 6 dot value is equal to header. Let's press F8. If you go back to the worksheet, you will notice that F1 now has header. So I'll finish running the code. So we saw how to find the last row in a particular column, and we also saw how to find the last column in a specific row. Now if you want to find the last row in the entire worksheet, then how will you find the last row? There are scenarios where one column has more data than the other. So for example, if I type here Frank, and if I use the same approach as we saw earlier, then we will not get 5 as the last row, we will get 4, because we are finding the last row in column A. But here the data is in B5. So let's say we want to find the last row in the worksheet. It can be in any column. In such a scenario, we will use .find to find the last row. I will talk about .find in detail in the next video when I'm explaining about user forms. For demonstration purpose, I'll quickly write a small piece of code. So what I'll do is I'll go back, I will insert a module, and then I'll declare a procedure called sub last row column using find. I'll quickly write the code and then I'll explain it. And we are done. I'll not go too much into .find in this video. Like I mentioned, I will cover this in my next video. If I have to briefly explain it, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the last cell which has text in it. Now, if I run this code, see what happens. I get the last row which has data is 5. If I go back, this is 5. If I type something here, let's say blah blah, and if I go back and if I run this code, see what happens. I get the last row which has data is 9. I'll go back and I'll delete that. So we saw how we can use .find to find the last row in a worksheet. We can also use .find to find the last row in a particular column. So for example, if I want to find the last row in column A, all I have to do is change .cells to .columns1. And if I run this, I get 4. So the last row which has data is 4. Just like we used .find to find the last row, we can also use .find to find the last column in a worksheet. I'm going to make few changes in this code. So I'm going to change this to last call. I'll copy this from here and I'll paste it here and here. Next, I will change is .column and this becomes columns and this becomes .cells. I will also change this to column. Now when I run this, see what happens. It tells me the last column which has data is 6, which is column F. Column A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, 5 and 6. Just like we use .find to find the last row in a column, we can also use .find to find the last column in a row. So what I can do is I can change this to rows 2. Let's say we want to find the last column in row 2. If I run this, see what happens. I get the last column which has data is 5 and not 6. Had I used rows 1, then I would have got 6. So if I go back here and if I change this to 1 and if I run this, I will get 6. Okay, moving on. Now let's understand how we can read data from a worksheet. Reading data is also very simple as writing to a cell. Let's insert a new module. I will create a procedure called reading data. Again, I'll quickly write the code and then I will explain what the code does. And we are done. Now let me explain what this code is doing. I've declared 4 variables. And in this variable, I'll be reading from the worksheet and I'll be storing those values in these 4 variables. RW is the row from where I want to read the values. So I've set it to 3. So if I go back, this is the row that I want to pick up the values from. So I go back and here I'm saying first name is equal to .range B3 .value. So I'm saying whatever is in cell B3, put it in first name. Similarly, whatever is in C3, put it in last name, D3 in DOB and E3 in gender. Finally, I'm saying message box first name and display the first name. Let's run this. And you will notice I get first name is Jane. So it picked up the B3 value, which is here. Similarly, if I want the gender, then I can say gender and I can copy the gender and I can paste it here. So whatever is picked up from E3 will be shown here. When I run this, I get female. Like I said, reading values from the cell is as simple as writing values to a cell. Since we are reading values from a cell, I want to take this opportunity to explain something very important. In this example, I'm using .value to read the value. I always prefer using .value2. In all the examples of this video, I have deliberately used dot value so that I can build up to this moment so that I can explain the difference. There is one more property called dot text. I have seen people using that as well for reading values. So now I will explain the difference between dot value, dot value2 and dot text. So I'm going to insert a new module. I'm going to create a procedure called sub value2 text example. I'm going to declare my worksheet object, set ws is equal to sheet1. I'm going to use 3 message boxes to show a value from an Excel cell. Let's say I want to show the values from, let's say, B3. So I'll go back and I'll type msg box ws.range b3.value. I will copy the same line and I'll paste it again and again. In the second line, I will change value to value2, and in the third, I will change value to text. Now, when I run this, I get Jane for dot value, Jane again for dot value2, and Jane again for dot text. So which one should I use? Should I be using dot value or dot value2 or dot text? Let's first understand what dot value2 does. Dot value2 gives you the underlying value of the cell. The underlying value can be empty or it can have text, double precision numbers, errors, or a boolean value. Dot value, like value2, mostly gets the underlying value. The only exception is when the cell is formatted as date or currency. In that case, we do not get the underlying value as we get in the case of dot value2. Let's understand this using an example. Now, if you look at cell D2, which is a date. This date is stored as sequential serial numbers in Excel so that they can be used in calculations. By default, January 1, 1900 is serial number 1. So here Excel stores 01/01/1980 as 29221. So the underlying value of the cell here is 29221. So let's see what do we get when we run this code. So let's test this. I'm going to change the cell address to D2. So if I go back, now instead of B3, I'm going to use D2. When I run this, the value gives me 01/01/1980. Let's see what dot value2 gives. It gives 29221. Let's see what dot text gives. It gives 01/01/1980. So we saw that dot value2 gives us the underlying value of the cell. Now let's try another experiment. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to format this cell. So I will click on format cells and I will change it to DDMMMYYYY and I'll click on OK. When I run this code, I get 01/01/1980 for dot value. I get 29221 for dot value 2. And for text, I get 01/January/1980. The dot text gets the formatted value of a cell. So whatever you see in the cell visually is retrieved when you use dot text, and hence it should be avoided to read values. It's a read-only property, so as it is, you can never use it to write values to a cell. Now let me demonstrate why you should not use dot text. What I will do is, I will go back to the worksheet and I'm going to reduce the width of the column. The moment you do that, you will notice that the cell now displays hash. But if you look at the formula bar, it still has the value. Now, if you go back and if you run the code, you will notice dot value still gives you 01/01/1980. Dot value2 still gives you 29,221. Now let's see what dot text gives us. It gives us hash. So like I said, avoid the use of dot text to read the values from a cell. Also, if possible, use dot value2 instead of dot value to read values from a cell. Dot value is actually slower than dot value2. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that avoid the use of dot select, dot activate, selection, Activecell, Activesheet, Activeworkbook, etc. etc. There are three main reasons for this. The first, it slows down your code. Second, it is usually the main cause of runtime errors. And third, you may get unexpected results. To understand this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything here. And then I'm going to write a small piece of code, subsample. Here, what we are doing is we are asking the code to select a sheet and then select a cell. Then we are asking the code to write the date to the selected cell. And finally, we are formatting the date that is inserted in the selection. So let's run this code. Now, if you go back to sheet 1, you will notice that the date has been written here. Let me make this column bigger. So it's 12 December 2021. This is what we wrote. Using .select and selection slows down the code. There's a faster way to do this. So I'll call it sample A, and then I will declare a procedure called sample B. This code can be written as dim ws as worksheet, set ws is equal to sheet1 with ws.range d7 end with. And then I'm going to copy these two and I'm going to paste it here. And then I'll delete the selection. Here what I've done is I've declared a worksheet object. I've initialized it to sheet 1, and then here I'm identifying the range where I want to write and format the cell. This code is faster than using .select because there's no select happening. We are directly declaring the worksheet, we are initializing the worksheet, and then we are writing to the range and then formatting the range. Now in this example, you may not notice the difference, but on a huge data set, you will notice a considerable difference. The next problem that we may face is that we may get runtime errors. Let's test this. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back to the worksheet and I will hide sheet 1. And now if I run sample A, see what happens. I get select method of worksheet class failed, runtime error 1004. And if I click on debug, it says sheet1.select. This is because the code is trying to select a sheet and it cannot because it is hidden. So I'll stop the code. Now if I run sample B, see what happens. No errors, and the date is written to cell D7. The third problem that we may face is that we may get unexpected results. So let me go back and unhide the sheet. Now what I'm going to do is I'll go back to the code and I will change this code to Activesheet. Rest remains the same. So if I go back and I delete D7 value, and if I go back and I run this, and if I go back to the worksheet, I'll see the date there. Let's delete this date for a moment. What if by mistake you selected sheet 2 and then you ran the code? This code will write to the active sheet. So if you go back, you will notice that the date has been written in D7 of sheet 2. And if you go back, there's no date in cell D7. Here the worksheet is empty, so you'll immediately catch, oh, I selected the wrong sheet and hence it wrote to this sheet. But imagine this happening in a workbook which has many worksheets with lots of data. Trust me, it is possible that you may miss this. So after running the code, if you go back to sheet 1, you will not see the data. You would be scratching your head as to why did your code not give the desired results. Here, the active sheet is not the sheet that you think is active. And this is the reason why you should avoid using Activesheet. Similarly, also avoid the use of Activeworkbook. Now you must be thinking, if I'm supposed to ignore Activesheet or Activeworkbook, then where should I use it? Well, that's a very valid question. There are times when you're creating an add-in and you want the code to run from a click of a button on whichever sheet is active. It doesn't matter. In such a scenario, yes, go ahead and use the Activesheet or Activeworkbook. It makes sense using it there. So if you go back to the code and if you look at sample B, it doesn't matter which sheet is active. Even if sheet 2 is active, the code will always write to the relevant sheet, which is sheet 1 in this case, because we have properly qualified our range with the relevant worksheet. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back and I'll make sheet 2 active. I'll delete this and then I will run sample B. So if I go back, nothing is written to sheet 2, and if I go to sheet 1, the data is in D7. Just ensure that your each and every object is fully qualified and you'll be good to go. Time for a quick recap. In this video, we understood about the worksheet object. We understood what is the difference between a worksheet and a sheet object. We also saw how we can write to a specific range in a specific worksheet. We also saw how we can find the last row or the last column in case we wanted to write to a specific range. We also saw what is the difference between .value, .value2 and .text properties of a range object, and so many other things. If you still have a question, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can also email me on support@tamexcel.com and I will reply to you within 48 hours. I also have a Facebook group called Microsoft Excel-VBA. Feel free to join that, and if you have any questions, post it there. If I am online, I will definitely answer it. Otherwise, there are other experts who would be more than happy to help you. Just a quick reminder, I'll be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. If you like the kind of videos that I'm putting up, and if you would like to extend support towards the channel, then go ahead and watch a couple of videos. Specifically watch the playlist, because that is where I have arranged the videos in a specific order. Watch those videos, drop a couple of likes, and if you still have not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. And I will see you on Thursday when we talk about how to work with user forms.